Good evening, and welcome to another edition of Let's Chat About That. We're going to be talking about something that everybody's talking about, but nobody seems to be able to get the hang of actually talking about to each other. And that's the conversation going on in our nation, and to be quite honest, it's going on around the entire world, that how in the world can we come together and find unity when everything seems to be just chaotic and falling apart. So we're just going to have a conversation about bringing people together based on our differences.
Yeah. And
with me to join me in this, by the way, I'm Cleve Walker, in case you haven't met me before. I've been here for about 18 years, so maybe you know me, but with me is a young man I only met just recently. Mo Huggins is on the pastoral staff at Stevens Creek Church in Augusta. Now, you're the Next Steps pastor?
Yes, sir.
And what does that involve?
So I help with assimilation and getting people plugged in and getting started and serving at our church and whatever your next step. We have a saying at our church that really we exist to help you take your next step towards God. So whatever that next step is, we want to help you with that.
You know, the cool thing about that, Mo, is that means you're the perfect person to talk to about issues relating to people coming together.
Absolutely.
Because your whole ministry is involved in helping people to make a transition, in your case, into church life. But we're talking about helping people make a transition into coming together in some sense of unity, because I don't have to tell you, it's pretty crazy out there right now.
It is definitely challenging right now. I think tension is existing wherever you look in all spheres of life, and within tension there is opportunity, but I think now is the moment for conversations to be had. And I've said this a bunch of times, but it seems like right now we're talking past each other and at each other instead of with each other.
Well, Mo, you use the word tension. I call it chaos, okay? As a matter of fact, a lot of people would say, I can't say this, but some people say it's making them tear their hair out because, you know, it's just that.
You still got a little bit of it.
Only a little bit, and I can't mess with that. But my point is, it's really crazy.
Yeah.
And it's like you said, I'm glad you brought it out that way. And by the way, at points during the evening, if you have a comment or question that you would like to ask Mo or just make, we would love to hear about it. Just go to the comment section and give your question, and Mo will do his best to answer it.
Yeah.
And if we can't answer it, I'll blame it all on Mo. But the point being is, we're just going to have a conversation, because I think you made a great point already. People seem to be talking past each other.
Yeah.
I was reading in Amos chapter 3 in the Old Testament before I came over here, and it asked a question. It said, can two walk together if they're not agreed upon where they're going? And I thought about that. I think that's part of the problem, Mo. I don't think we know where we want to go, even though we know we want to get to where we are now.
We don't like it here, but we kind of disagree on how we move forward. And that talking past each other really results in widening the divide that currently exists, instead of kind of getting closer and say, yes, I may not understand your side, or I don't see it the way you have said it, but let's have a conversation. And if I have a conversation, it's really important for me to listen to understand and not to respond. This one of the reasons why I've kind of resisted even having any of these conversations on social media, because all we're doing is, I want to have the funniest retort or the best argument back, instead of really saying, do I understand where this person is coming from, why they feel the way they do? Have I created a space safe enough for people to create conversation, ask questions that are difficult, or respond and listen to content that may be uncomfortable for you to hear? And those things are necessary if we're going to unite and kind of move forward.
I love to hear you say that, because again, I still think that the problem with trying to have a conversation is, I think people have a different idea of what a conversation is. And I sense, Mo, that a lot of folks feel that rather than having a conversation, a lot of people simply want you to agree with them. They want you to hear them. They don't want to necessarily hear you, and vice versa. So let's start at the beginning. And by the way, I want to make clear to everybody that Mo and I don't have the definitive answers on anything. Okay, we're not speaking for an entire group. I don't think you presume to that.
No,
okay,
I do not.
You're not even speaking for the church.
No,
okay.
I'm not. I'm speaking as
good
Mo Huggins
and that's
my thoughts.
That's
my
a good
ideas.
point. So, Mo, you tell us what it was like for you as a black man growing up in America. One of the issues that a lot of folks have is, okay, there's a difference in the way that we relate to the police force coming up, law enforcement, and things of that nature. So, did you have any experience that kind of reflects or deals with some of these issues that are being raised up?
Yeah, I've. That's an interesting question, and mainly because I've had experiences that would or should jade me, but have not jaded me, and mainly because I try to look at things through the totality of my life experience. And so I remember when I was in college and I was walking home to, I was walking in my neighborhood and I was about to go up to my house, and there's a cop that comes up behind me and he says, "What are you doing in this neighborhood? What are you doing here?" basically. And then I said, "I live right here." And then he was like, "I need to see some ID." So I walk up to my house, use my key, open the door, go get my wallet, and then I show it to him. He writes down my license number and says, "Now I know where to come if I have any problems in this neighborhood."
Wow.
You know, and then there's been other couple of little instances like that, but my overwhelming experience has been, you know, positive. I have friends who are law enforcement, and so, but I understand why people of color are hesitant when facing or experiencing interactions with the police, because you don't know what kind of person you're going to get. And not only that, is it only takes once for you to be burned to be careful not to touch a stove.
Right.
So if it happened once, yeah, the preponderance of evidence would say most aren't like that, but it does begin to change your lens and how you look at individuals and how you see those interactions.
You know, it's funny because situations like that, not only did you have that situation where you were kind of demeaned because this officer had that feeling without any reason to have that feeling other than the color of your skin, but then it tends to make you more tense, like you say, and when you see law enforcement, and that tends to make them more tense because the question might be, what are they up to? Why are they afraid? So even if it's not a racial type thing, it just might be feeding off each other, that little sense of tension. And I think we're seeing a lot of that now. I think a lot of our law enforcement, who are many are just very good individuals just trying to do their job.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, an atmosphere is being created where both sides now are tensing up around each other.
Absolutely.
And I think this can escalate things in a way that nobody intends for it to.
Yeah, and I think there's more to be said about our implicit biases, like what we know or what we see, and sometimes that's happening on both sides. So someone might have an implicit bias that this cop is going to treat me a certain way. A cop might have an implicit bias that these kind of folks or these people are going to act a certain way. And it causes this divide and this tension to widen and become greater and bigger. Whereas if I just treat you as a human, as a person, and I think the other side of this argument, specifically with police officers, is really part of, in my opinion, protecting the blue, is rooting out these bad apples. Listen, when I call 911, I want the police to show up. I believe in law enforcement. I trust, to an extent, law enforcement. I want them to be there. But at the same time, I want that same protection that they offer society, that they say that about their units as well. And saying, if I see something funny, I'm not going to ignore it or just assume, hey, it will go out. I'm going to weed out the bad apples because they make us look bad and make our job more difficult. And we're called to protect and serve.
It's funny you say that because I've heard law officers express those very same words.
Good.
They're saying that situation makes us look bad. I'm out here trying to do my job, and here's this person doing something in a way that's reflecting badly on the entire force.
Yeah.
And that's sad because it's the same thing that has been done to many people of color over the years.
Yeah.
That you've been pigeonholed or profiled, and therefore you're automatically suspect. But a lot of us, unfortunately, are turning it right around and doing the same thing to law enforcement, painting them with the same broad brush that we don't want ourselves painted with. So it's you're touching on a lot of things. So, all right, so you're growing up, you've had that experience, you've seen other people have experiences, you're aware of that. How come you aren't bitter? I mean, why is Mo able to say, hey, I think that we should deal with this problem, deal with the bad officers, find a way to perhaps better regulate or train, but I am not bitter or fearful about the police force. How do you get there?
Multiple ways. I think, first of all, my savior is Jesus Christ, and he kind of changes things.
He does,
not
doesn't
just
he?
kind of, but he ultimately changes the way you view things. And if Christ resides in your heart, it's really hard for bitterness to linger there at the same time. So, and the other thing about bitterness is a cup of poison that you want to give to the person, but ends up really destroying you. And so I refuse to be entangled by that. The second thing is really exposure and experience with positive interactions. We have,
explain that.
I mean, my college RA is a police officer in North Carolina, and I know his heart. I know who he is as a person. And I'm like, I've had too many positive interactions with him. I know what he's like. One of my good friends growing up, we're in a group chat to this day. He's a police officer. And so I know him. I know who he is. Here in town, a few officers that I've interacted with, and just quality individuals and just positive enforcement and just positive interaction has made it where, I mean, that was someone who was wrong, but all of these other people have proven that this was an anomaly. And so if you don't have those positive interactions, it's really hard to combat that negative one that you've had.
All right, so let me ask you this. It goes beyond law enforcement issues. The statements of many is that there's a whole systemic thing, not just in law enforcement, but in society, and the term privilege, or particularly the term white privilege, has been used by many to describe something that really they would say the larger population is not even aware they're doing. And yet we feel it. We meaning people of color feel it, and therefore it's been an issue for us in so many ways outside of law. And many are concerned that the greater culture, what they call the dominant culture, whites have a privilege that benefits them and puts others down. How do you answer that? Is that true in your experience, or is it something where you can explain so somebody else can understand why so many are struggling with relationships in this
Let me say this first, that I am not an expert in this area. And so my answer I would point you to resources. One of the books that is phenomenal, it's called The Color of Compromise. And it just talks about the church and racism, how it's been intertwined for a while. But I do believe that there is a privilege, if you will, and it is rooted in the way our nation was created and in how our nation has been built up. Have we made progress? Absolutely. Have we made leaps and bounds of progress? Absolutely. But there are things that are still barriers to progress for people of color, and there are still hindrances that are system related and not necessarily opportunity related. And so, again, it's not something that I think it can't be changed by one individual. It takes a community to say, you know what, this is something that needs to be addressed. This is something that I notice, I understand that you have conversations with your children that I'll never have to have those kind of conversations. You experience things that I'll never have to experience, and those kind of things, I think, it's important to notice that, understand that, and empathize in that area. And then again, in order for us to chart a path forward, we need each other. So this is not something that's going to be, all right, hey, you're bad or this is bad. This is really, hey, we as a collective community, as humans, need to move forward together. And if one is hurting and one says, hey, this is an issue, this is a problem, really all of us coming to the table to talk about it and say, how do we move forward with this?
I'm talking with Mo Huggins. He's on the pastoral staff of Stephen Street Church in Augusta, talking about the issue right now facing our nation where it seems to be at a point of great divide, like I haven't seen in quite some time. Now, there's a slight difference in age between myself and Mo, just a little bit, maybe a little bit more than 3 decades.
Yeah.
Okay. But let's just say I was actually born and raised in Mississippi in the segregated South. I was born during a time when separate but equal was a thing. It was for real. There were certain places that we couldn't go based upon that, based solely upon our skin color. And I was born in a time when there were definitely elements of law enforcement that were not particularly friendly towards people of color. I've been to those times, and I got to say, this is not those times.
Yeah.
Okay, you made a point when you say we've made great leaps. Is there more to do? Yes. But I think that the dramatic changes, since I can remember coming up, need to be acknowledged. And I think sometimes it gets kind of wiped away in the fervor of correcting now how far we have come. If you'd have told me back as a teenager that we would have a black president, that we would have 2 Supreme Court justices who are black, that we would have media moguls who are some of the most powerful people in the industry, and that we would have governors of southern states, mayors of southern cities, I would have said, I don't know, that's not going to happen in my lifetime. But it happened. And Mo, it happened, I think, for one of the reasons you stated, people coming together, people working together, people who are different. So I actually think it's our differences that make us strong. Now, you've been married how long?
Only 4 years and some change. I'm trying to catch up to you.
Well, I've been married 45 years, so you got a little ways to go.
Yeah.
You hang in there. My wife's very patient. So I got to ask you, are you and your wife very much alike personality-wise?
We are not. We are we are opposites in a lot of ways. My brain never turns off. Like even as we're talking, there's like an inner monologue, kind of just always thinking. I remember one time we were on a trip driving somewhere, and I just looked at her and said,
"What are you thinking about?" And she's like, "Nothing." And I'm like, "What do you mean you're thinking of nothing? Like how? Like the only time my brain is silent is when I'm sleeping, and probably it's still going on. I'm just not conscious of it." And she kind of helps me to be present in the moments, to slow down, to just really understand that the now matters, and to enjoy the beauty and the blessings of what God has given us, what God has created, and what God has really shown us. And where I'm probably on the other side, really pushing and propelling and seeing what can be and building and strategizing and thinking and those kind of things.
See, the amazing thing is, I think it's a principle that we can bring to bear in our current situation. Because you guys, and if you're like me, I made the mistake of trying to make my wife more like me. That doesn't work, okay? Nope. She didn't appreciate it either, and I'm glad she didn't do it because we don't even know me. Yeah. But we can bring the joy of our differences, because the differences in our personality and background go deeper than our skin color. You and I can tell, are different in so many ways, okay? Partially because of the demographics. I'm older than you, but we have different backgrounds. And I just think that, not all, but I think many are trying to bring an idea of uniformity rather than unity to the discussion. If you don't say the very same things, the very same way, in the very same attitude, then you can't be part of the solution.
Yeah, I definitely don't agree with that. I think uniformity is not unity. I think the blessing and the beauty of even our country, America, is its diversity. I was saying to somebody earlier today at lunch, I was just saying, I think what makes America special and what has kept propelling America forward is that we are the only country that has this just plurality of people and ideas and thought patterns and all these different cultures that are pouring into who we are supposed to be. And so you're seeing advances in medicine, and you're seeing advances in technology and peanut butter and all sorts of other things that are just like, it seems like every other place kind of America just has spread out wide and has really pushed forward. And I think because we have this wide diversity, and I've heard this phrase, and I really want to push back against it. People say I'm colorblind. I don't want anybody to be colorblind. Don't deny the image bearer that I am, that I bear the image of God, and He decided that I should be made this way. I want you to embrace it and celebrate it, just like with any other person who are how God made you. You should be embraced and celebrated. That whether you're, they used to sing that song, red and yellow, black and white, they are precious in His sight. However, whatever that was, God, don't ignore my color. Embrace it, celebrate it, and know that I have something to contribute to the table, just like you have something to contribute. And let me yes. Yeah. You notice that? But that doesn't erase our distinction. That Ephesians, Paul talks about the beauty of the church. Paul talks about how he's really, that God will point to the church in future ages. And I know everybody may not be a believer, but I'm really talking to people in Christ and believe in Him. But he points to that in future ages to show forth His glory. And really, I think that has everything to do with how did God take these so many different people with different personalities and preferences and styles and languages and create
I mean, and I'm glad you're approaching it that way, because one of the things I feel is that the church is the only group, all the groups are trying to come either they have to get because we're supposed to have that adopting law, that unconditional love that cannot be so I'm trying to give you that I just like maybe this is my next question, because the church, the American church right now seems all this time about how to approach the situation. I see a lot of frustration on pastors and leaders and parishioners who say, "Well, what do we do?" They're just as confused. I hate to say it, we're just as confused as the non-believing populace is about what to do next. Address it from just that point of view. What can the church, the bride of Christ, do about this?
Yeah. Larger answer, I think what we cannot
Be mad as a church that people leading this revolution are, or this movement, whatever you want to call it, are not Christ centered or Christ focused. You know, that they don't have a Christ moral compass. Because I personally believe we as a church have abdicated or given up our right to lead on social changes. Every social change in the history of America has been birthed out of the church, except for this one. This is the one, something happened in the last 25, 30 years where we've kind of taken a step back. The civil rights movement, the abolishment of slavery, a few other movements that are not coming to mind now. These things are birthed out of the church. These things are moved forward by the church because we have the answer. We have the moral compass. Because if you're searching for truth, you're going to end up at Jesus.
Yeah.
And you know, I tell people who are on their journey, keep looking, but you're going to find Jesus if you actually search for real moral truth. So in my opinion, what we can do as a church is find a place to build bridges. I want you to begin to look at your friend circle and say, do I have an echo chamber? Is it only people who look like me, talk like me, think like me? Maybe I need to begin to look and be intentional about building a bridge with somebody who comes from a different worldview. And it may not just be racial, it could be economic wise, it could be whatever different differences that we have, but begin to build bridges in order for me to say, I need to connect and know how somebody else who doesn't sit in my seat feels, thinks, or believes. And likewise, they need to hear my perspective. What I have to offer is valuable, and my ear that I have to offer is also valuable. I think really from a church perspective, big C, we've got to stop allowing ourselves to be separate. We've got to, and I'm talking about the city of Augusta, we've got to find a way to connect on a bigger level that we're going to show our city what unity looks like.
You know, it's funny you bring that up because you sound like you're describing something that's akin to what I would call friendships.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's a powerful thing. Mm-hmm. And I got to tell you, going back to what we talked about earlier, how different you are than your wife, mm-hmm. and I am than mine, and how those differences actually make our relationship work. Some of my best friends are also very much different from me.
Yeah.
I mean, we have common values or things of that nature, but we have totally different personalities.
Yeah.
I got friends who like to go out hunting and fishing, and I don't. Okay.
Yeah.
The only thing I've ever caught trying to fish is mosquitoes. I don't handle that. And I have other friends who have other situations and come from totally different backgrounds, and they enrich my life.
Yeah.
So to me, you're talking about something, and it's not something that can be like enforced. I don't think you're saying you should try to develop a quota to have so many different.
No.
But allowing for some type of time and opportunity to actually see, hey, maybe a relationship will form.
Yeah, and just I think relationships, they happen organically, but they also happen intentionally.
Okay, explain that.
So what I mean by that is that when you met your wife, yeah, your chemistry may have developed organically, but you pursued her. No?
I did.
Yeah. You had to go after
she pushed
and
me
engage.
Away I kept pursuing.
You kept. Oh, I love that. She pushed you away. There was some tension to begin. There was a little rejection or hesitation.
She thought it was
on her part. Yeah.
Okay.
To begin. But you didn't give up just because there seemed to be an obstacle in the way. You saw this relationship as valuable enough for me to pursue. And that's the challenge that I would have for our city, to just view relationships as valuable and something that we should intentionally pursue, not a quota. This is, sometimes we want to get so mechanical or like rigid with this. This is not something like that. This is really opening yourself up to the opportunity to really see people in a different light, and not just high and by, but I want to do life with you. I want to be in relationship with you so that I have a perspective that maybe I never would have had before.
Maybe call somebody up and say, hey, how about let's catch a coffee, get some coffee sometime.
Absolutely.
And just, I have actually formed relationships that way, and actually found deep friendships developed that I thought we really not going to be good friends, but it actually turned out that way. But only because, and that word I like to use was intentional.
Absolutely.
And I think for the faith person, for the follower of Christ, we can make that intentionality a matter of prayer. Asking God to literally open doors, maybe opportunities, circumstances that I can walk into.
Yeah, here's what I know. I know that, and I'm speaking to the believer, but I know people of faith that when you ask God for an opportunity to serve, he will create the way for you to do that. When you say, Lord, I'm available. Lord, I want to be part of your solution. I don't want to be on the sidelines. I want to be an active participant in what you're trying to do to bring heaven on earth, how you are trying to invade the kingdom of darkness and allow the kingdom of light to reign and rule here on earth. I want to be a part of that. The Lord will open up doors of opportunity for you to serve in places that will make an impact. And you may not think it as significant, but every relationship, every bridge built is significant because it creates bigger bridges and creates a way for more people to go across onto the other side.
It's like putting together a net, knitting a net. You do that one little point at a time. You can't do the whole thing at one time. And I'm afraid one of the problems I feel anyway with the current move or parts of the current movement is there's an attempt to almost see we can rush and do this thing overnight. Or because it's been so bad for so long, we want to get it done. And I understand the sense of urgency. But when you try to do it that way, more often than not, you can create a mess. Because relationships are not formed that way. At least I've not seen it been the case. You know?
No, that's real. I think you're absolutely right. My mother used to say, you ain't get into this mess overnight and you ain't gonna get out of it overnight. And so I think it's important for us to understand schisms and fractures and tension that we feel now and that has really been elevated and lifted. That's not going to be fixed overnight. These are things that we're going to take steps in and that we're going to have to walk this thing out by faith. You know, some things, scripture says it like this: some things only go through prayer and fasting. Some things only go through time and intentional time. And we're going to need the Lord's help to really do this, but we're going to have to participate in what he's trying to do. In Ephesians, he talks about that in Christ, he has torn down the wall of separation that divides us, and that we now have this opportunity. In Corinthians, he talks about that he has given us this ministry of reconciliation, that his church, his body is really, we are given this opportunity to reconcile humanity with God, but also reconcile each other with each other, humanity with each other. And so I'm excited about this opportunity. When you look at the book of Genesis, it was in the dark that the Spirit of God was hovering in the midst of chaos. And what looks like chaos may be an opportunity for revival, maybe an opportunity for God to really move in a way that we haven't seen in a while.
If you have any questions, again, we welcome you to just text us those questions. We'll deal with them. We'll give you our opinion, if not necessarily the correct answer. But now let's get to a more difficult part of what we're facing in America right now, because you brought it out, you alluded to it, and I think it needs to be dealt with. There are people of goodwill who are struggling to bring together a real sense of unity and community and relationships, just like we're talking about. And not all of them are believers, but they're just folks of goodwill who want to see America take another step closer to what it means to us all to be Americans and in this together. Unfortunately, there are elements, and this happens in every movement. It happened in the civil rights movement, which I saw. I was around when Dr. King led that peaceful march into the next step of unity in our nation. But there are always elements, because there's a devil, I guess that's one way of putting it, who will try to piggyback on the legitimate efforts and concerns of citizens to actually sow discord. And many times we've already seen the horrific property loss and theft and vandalism, not in every instance, but a lot. And unfortunately, there are forces and philosophies that are piggybacking on this legitimate movement. And that's caused a lot of folks concern, to the point that many are backing away from the movement itself because of the presence of that. How do you address that from your point of view?
I think it's sad. I think you really summed it up, that sometimes the message can be lost when agitators from the outside come in and try to convolute or muddy the message. What I like about what's happened in our particular city is that it seems like the message was able to get out and be clean, and there wasn't really that kind of disruption. I'm not well versed on who is involved in all of those different things. I know there are some bad actors, some groups that want to use this opportunity to further divide us instead of really uniting us. And those individuals need to be called out and say, hey, this is not okay. And really, we need to do our best not to engage them on the level that they want to.
Now, how do you mean? What level do they want us to engage with them on?
They want us to see the people as the enemy. There's, I don't know the name, Bungaloo or starts with a B. I don't know the people, but their mission is to incite a new civil war and to really rip the country apart. But I refuse to allow anybody to make me hate somebody else. I refuse to engage in that. We don't have to agree for us to be friends. We could even disagree and not be disagreeable. That there is, at the end of the day, we all bleed red. At the end of the day, we are a part of the United States of America. And I know we look divided right now, but we are in one country. And I don't want the schisms or people to profit off of the schisms to allow us to continue to further the divide. That this is an opportunity. Yes, there are people who are hurt and frustrated and who are doing that peacefully and those kind of things. And this is an opportunity to say, your voice is being heard. Let's come to the table and let us reason together and find a way forward, and to not really engage some of these other groups, whatever their names are.
It's also further reason for prayer, for us to really pray that those forces of darkness, because as I said, the enemy is going to get involved in anything that people are involved in. And so he is the motivating force behind that. And we need to begin to pray spiritually that those type of strongholds might be broken.
Absolutely. The enemy only, he doesn't create, he corrupts, right? So he will take anything and corrupt it. That he doesn't create anything new. He just takes something and tries to turn it to something wrong or bad. And so we do have to pray to pull down those strongholds, but we've got to not just pray, but put action behind our prayers. And I use the example of David. David, he would say, Lord, shall I go? Shall I go? And he's praying, he's put it before the Lord. But then when the Lord responds, he begins to put action behind the prayers that he makes. And so I think as a church, and I'm talking Big C church, we've got to get to a place, God, we're praying, we need your answers. And I've seen some incredible stuff so far. I've seen baptisms happening at some of these protests. I'm seeing worship breaking out at some of these protests. And so wherever there is this force of darkness, I believe the Lord has called the church to be a light and to push back, as Pastor Marty says all the time, push back the darkness. That we have been called to be a city on the hill, to be that light in the midst of darkness.
I'm talking with Mo Huggins. He's the next step pastor on the staff at Stevens Creek Church in Augusta. And Mo, this next question this is a question that's been posed to me. Okay. So I'm passing it on to you now. And that is, so many people feel that there's been such a one-sided presentation of this. For example, you're talking about something that a lot of people don't know, that there are actual prayer movements, worship, and other things like this going on in many of these rallies and protests. As a matter of fact, in Atlanta, almost 10,000 people came together for worship during this movement. Unfortunately, the media doesn't present that very much, and I actually think doesn't want to. I hate to say it, whether you talk about elements that want to see division, but for some reason, the media finds it more compelling, more sensational to only put the focus in on that troublemaker or this group or that situation, and you would never know that there are other groups like you're talking about where God is moving mightily. So what advice would you give to folks who just say, it seems like every time I turn the TV on, all I see is hatred, bitterness, defacing of property, upheavals. I just can't handle it anymore. They're just feeling overwhelmed, and that's their whole image of the whole thing.
Turn off your TV. No, I know. Me personally, I don't watch the news. Here's their objective. The news, their assignment is to get ratings. It's not to share the news with you. I don't care who you watch. Their assignment is to get ratings, because ratings get them advertisers, and advertisers pay their budget. So they will do what they think and present to their audience what they believe will get you stuck and glued to the TV. And unfortunately, as a society, America, we like car wrecks. We slow down and we pay attention to those. We feel bad. We sometimes want to look away, but it's the thing that grabs our attention. So they're going to, not only do they car wrecks, but they want to play into your implicit bias and play into where you they feel like will be a trigger point for you. On all sides, in my opinion, the media is not your friend. They want your eyeballs, so your eyeballs will get them advertisement, and that will in turn get them money. I think you need to find a trusted news source that you can read, that and you don't really consume it, and it becomes something that you really allow. I say this a lot of times, you got to be careful about your portals, because your portals really are a window to your soul. Be careful what you see, be careful what you hear, be careful what you consume. And so you got to watch that. I'm not going to let this thing continually play over and over in my mind through my ears and through my eyes. And so, yes, I want to be informed, but I do not want this thing to consume me, because it can cause me to become jaded, bitter, and really kind of, again, widen that divide.
You know, what you're saying dovetails really into other complaints I've heard by people who constantly hear the news about COVID-19, about mounting deaths, news statistics, peaks and spikes, and this, that. They said, I can't bear that. So it's almost like a 1-2 punch.
Yeah.
People are already weary with the constant, steady drumbeat of bad news about the virus. Then on top of this, for them, for many, more confusion and more consternation. It's almost like their senses are overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So what you're saying makes a sense. You just think there needs to be a time that people just need to turn it off.
Turn off the TV, open your Bible, call a friend, go get coffee, sit out on your porch. Yes, be informed, but do not let this thing consume you and you be just over and over hearing the same thing, allowing it to replay, because it's not good for your soul. It's not good for your spirit.
Mo, one of the things that has helped me a lot, and you were talking about this earlier yourself, I now see, I always knew the church was vital, don't get me wrong, and an essential service. But now that many churches are able to physically come back together, even though the streaming and the Zoom meetings are great, don't get me wrong, they've been used by God, but there's nothing like the physical presence of other believers, seeing a smile, hearing the voice, praying together. And I think that in itself is going to help a lot. I think Stevens Creek recently began doing that.
Yeah, we're back open.
Tell us about the difference that makes, actually having the church congregate together again.
Yeah, I say this all the time. Heaven will not be virtual. So if you really only catch church virtually, you're missing, and you may not be prepared for eternity. But church opening back up has been amazing, and it's really nothing like being in community together and lifting up Jesus. Yes, you can do it on your own, but there is something that happens when the collective group gets together. I feel like you get a glimpse of what heaven looks like when we are all saying glory to the Lamb, that God, you are worthy, that we sing songs of praise and lift him up. It does something to your spirit, to your heart, to your soul on a level that really propels you forward to go out into the world and be his witness and to represent him. And so if you don't have a church home, now is the time to come see us at 600 Stevens Creek Road or on Peach Orchard Road, one church in 2 locations. We would love to have you.
And I'm sure that invitation is extended by any church.
Absolutely.
You know, but you're making a wonderful point. And again, you can stay with your family and lock down, and that's fun to a certain extent until the kids finally get on your last nerve. But it's fun to a while. But you need those unique relationships, the differences that you find in the dynamic of the church community to strengthen you. And I think that I really believe the church is going to be strengthened more to actually be really ready for the challenges that we're talking about right now.
Absolutely.
I think we've been caught off guard, as you say, this was not something the church, I think, was ready for. And then with the pandemic, it further exacerbated that because we really weren't ready. Many of us were reeling from spiritual loneliness and isolation. So I think the coming back together in the physical facilities could not come at a better time.
Yeah, we're communal beings by nature. We are not meant to, when God said it's not good for man to be alone, it was not just for physical intimacy. It was that you need to be in community, that you're not meant to walk this life alone. And being in a community, whether it's a small group, but specifically being in church together really plays a difference. It makes a difference in your life and in your world, in your children's world, and in your marriage, whatever you're going through. Church has a way of benefiting and blessing those things.
Another question that's come to me that I want to address to you, and you just touched on it, which thank you for flowing so well with me on this. Mo, now you're a family man.
Yes.
You have a child.
Yeah.
Okay. And what's a boy, girl?
Boy.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And so you know the importance of family and everything.
Absolutely.
All right. How do we prepare our children for the challenges that we're facing right now? Because many a parent has said, it's not just me I'm concerned about. I've got to find a way to, number one, I want to protect my children as much as I can from too much that they can't handle. But for the part they cannot be protected from, I want to prepare them for it. Where's the balance in that? How does a parent in a world where in many instances it seems like, man, I didn't even want to think about it, let alone talk to my kids about it. What do you do with that?
Here's my opinion on this, and I may be wrong. My kid is turning 3 on Saturday, so I'm not the most well-versed, but I was a youth pastor for 7 or 8 years. And here's my advice is that you expose your children to things in the house where you can talk to them about it and say, this is why this is not okay. And you don't allow their education of the issues to happen outside your house and they be shaped and formed by someone who may not have the worldview that you have. You want to be the main leader and teacher and influencer in your child's life. And so that does mean that you have to have difficult conversations. It does mean that you have awkward conversations. But what it will mean is that your child will not go out into the world unaware, and they won't be so easily swayed when the world presents them a different ideology than what you believe.
Well, that's a great answer. And I think that's one of the silver linings behind the lockdown. Many parents were forced to become the primary teachers of their children. And even though that caused a lot of hassles, I think it reminded them that ultimately you, the parent, are the one that's supposed to be the main source of knowledge, information, and influence on your child. We've got wonderful teachers, don't get me wrong. Love our teachers, praying for them, hope that our kids can go back with them in the next school year and they can begin again. But you just brought it up. It is the mom and the dad, it's the family, it's the mom, it's the father, whoever the situation may be. They're your responsibility to teach and to exemplify what you want.
Absolutely. They really are. And when we take ownership of that, and you said something that really is at my heart, I think strong families, strong marriages build strong families, and strong families build strong communities, and strong communities, with the help of Jesus, change the world.
Help me with this one. Maybe the black person says this, but a white person can say the same thing. Too much water has gone under the bridge for me to see this person again in anything like a favorable light. There's been too much. There's been too much injustice. There's been too much abuse, or there's been too much efforts to make me feel guilty. I'm just tired. I don't want to be a part of the problem because I just can't let go of this feeling of hurt, resentment, and pain, and even an attack on what I feel is my way of life as an American. How do you speak to that? Because that's a hard issue that's very difficult to deal with in an academic way.
Here's what I say. I say offense a lot of times is conviction in disguise. And if you can deal with the offense and get past the offense in the moment and see maybe there's a place of conviction that I need to deal with, or maybe there's a place of undealt with animosity that the Lord is really trying to work on in my life. And so yes, be offended at first, but then begin to navigate through those feelings and emotions and say, is there a place where my offense really is my defense against a conviction that the Lord has brought into my world? And so I would say to that person that you just re-examine the situation, that this is not the time to throw in the towel wherever you are, that there is hope, that there is a light, and that Jesus will make all things new. And he wants you to be a part of that. There are no spectators in God's kingdom, that we're all called to participate in what he is trying to do to make things better, make things new.
You know, I'm hearing you, and I'm hearing this in what you're saying as well. To me, as a believer, as a follower of Jesus, a lot of folks don't realize this, but to me, you see Jesus doing miracles in the scriptures. You see him doing amazing things. You see him walking on water. Okay, you see him even raising the dead.
Yeah.
But I believe that a person, you and I who follow Jesus, you are never more like Christ than when you are forgiven.
Yes.
I think at the moment of forgiving is when you approach to being more like Christ than ever before, because of all the things he did. The thing that to me that amazed me the most was when he was hanging on that cross, bleeding, torn, and,
I'm not that
dying.
saved.
But we know that's what we got to
Yes.
Ultimately, he said, and what he said is what I think we need to say in this situation with this movement that's going on right now. Jesus didn't just say, Father, forgive them, but he said, Father, forgive them because they don't really know what they're doing. He said that. And a lot of the people who are doing things right now that I find very offensive and I find very troubling and everything, they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And they're not going to ask me for forgiveness, but I can't wait for them to ask me. If it's going to be a Christ-like thing, I've got to extend it.
Yeah.
How do you get to that point, though, brother? How does it happen?
You just said a mouthful there. I think when Jesus in the book of John, he realizes that almost everything is fulfilled. And then he grabs a towel and begins to wash their feet. And he says to them, Peter's like, no, you can't wash my feet. And he says, if I don't do this, you have no part in me. And what Jesus was doing was setting a model of servanthood, that I'm going to lay down my pride. Really, unforgiveness is at some point a level of pride holding on to what is happening or the offense that you got to be able to give up your right to be right and say, I'm going to model Jesus's behavior and serve, even when you probably don't deserve it, because it's not about whether or not they deserve it. I get an opportunity to be an example of who Jesus Christ is. And when you have been forgiven, you really understand the power of forgiving someone else. When you, one of my favorite stories is when they bring the woman who is caught in adultery. She is dead wrong. And Jesus says to them, you without sin, cast the first stone. And you notice how they leave out from oldest to youngest. Meaning the person who has lived the longest, made the most mistakes, says, oh, I got to drop this stone because I've got too much in my life that I've done that makes it, there's no way I can catch this stone. I would have been the
first one having to drop my stone. I
wouldn't have been far behind you. I was dropping and running.
Mark has a question for you. He wants to know, what do you think is the key to expanding diversity within the local church? Is there a key for that? What is it?
Diversity in the local church. There are multiple sides of this conversation, and I'm just going to be frank, just blunt, is that it's really difficult to increase diversity from a Black church perspective, because for some reason a lot of times white people will not go to a black church. Black people will go to a white church, a black church. If the music is right, they might go to a Spanish church. You know, they'll go anywhere. And so it's really difficult from that perspective. But I think your stage matters. Who you put on your stage, who you hire on your staff. I think you can see very clearly in the city of Augusta how our churches are set up and what they anticipate.
Presentation itself.
Presentation matters.
Okay.
You know, you've got to be able to see yourself as belonging there before you ever think that you can be a part of there. And part of that is seeing myself in someone else who is there. I think really, I keep coming back to this term, but it's about building bridges. It's really just making relationships with people and say, why don't you come? Why don't you come check it out? The statistics say most people will come to church if invited.
I like
most
that.
people will come to church if invited.
I like that.
Right. And so God can use an ordinary conversation and transform it and allow it to be a powerful spiritual moment. And it's really going to take some people to decide, like, God didn't call me to a life of comfort, but he called me to a life of purpose. And if this is where I'm called to purpose, I'm going to get out of my comfort zone and go somewhere that is not expedient or convenient, but it is something that will make a difference and really begin to change.
Mo, you said a mouthful right there. You really did. And especially using the word comfort zone. Okay, got another question here. Okay, this is from Al. He said, should the church become more involved in the protests to actually show that we're called to be peacekeepers? What's your take on that, Mo?
Well, Al, I think every church is called to do this differently, and you've got to know your lane. There are some churches who are going to be called to be out front and center with this, and I pray Godspeed and go with you. There are some churches who are going to be building bridges in other areas. God needs people in every aspect of this society and really his church to be playing in every avenue to really make that impact. So I would say, Al, if you feel a burden for that, to be a light in those places. And there are a lot of, I know the news shows you differently, but there are a lot of pastors and leaders who are engaged and involved in these things, Bible believing, Christ-centered people who are not only witnessing there, but worship is happening. And really, it's a time that it is a multicultural movement where you're seeing something that you'll never see on a Sunday, where you're seeing Black, white, Spanish, all sorts of people worshiping on the streets, in the middle of the streets. And so if you're called to do that, I'd say go for it. If you don't feel called to do that, that is not a problem. That's not, you shouldn't feel shame or guilt that you're not there on the front lines. But what I will say is God has called your church to be a part of the solution somewhere, and to find that fit and run full force.
Or another way of saying it, because I have several friends, whites, who went to some of the protest meetings and stuff that, and they said, I went mainly not to protest, but I just wanted to stand and pray. And they just prayed. They just said, I felt, and I wanted to be in proximity. And so part of what you're saying is this: sometimes you have to do what the Holy Spirit leads you to do.
Absolutely.
And he doesn't necessarily lead everybody to do the same thing about things like that. So I think that was a great answer. And maybe people need to start asking specifically about that.
Where have you called me to serve? If you do anything this week, that would be a prayer that I think you need to lift up. It's, God, how have you called me to serve you in this moment, in this season? And make it clear to me and give me the willingness to be obedient to that. Because most of the time, how he describes it in scripture is, hey, you got to deny yourself, what you desire, your preference, what you really want. Take up your cross and follow me. What he
Love
calls
that.
you to is not necessarily convenient, but it is filled with
I
purpose.
love that. Take up your cross, follow me, get out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Mo Huggins, he's been my guest. He's the one of the pastoral staff of Stevens Creek Church. Mo, thank you so much.
Thank you,
You've shared
Cleve.
some
I've
great
really
insight.
enjoyed being here. It's been a good time. And I know you guys do such great work here at 88.3. Great work.
Thank you for that. And thank you for showing me, us again. It's our differences that make us strong. The common ground is just coming together. around this
Yes.
difference. Thank you so much for joining us for another edition of Let's Chat About That. We really appreciate that. We hope you've gained a little bit of insight, or at least something to stir the imagination and something to pray about. Hope you have a great evening. Bye-bye.